The Henry Stickmin Collection was the 4th game in my 12 days of Hey Jay, and if you have a few friends and some hours to kill, I really recommend playing this with them. Now I'm the big sus.
Hey Jay review.
Welcome back, Classic Crew, to another Hey Jay review, and I can call this a Hey Jay review, for I have made it to the end of Henry Stickmin. I've seen all the endings, most of the content. I can't say I did all the achievements, but this game was very comfortable to complete in about a 4-5 hour period. If I really wanted 100% completion, I would have had to play another 3 to 4 hours with a guide to get all the achievements and the NPC clicking, which isn't that unreasonable. So this game is a great little game to just kind of pick up and play in 1 or 2 game sessions. Actually, I really recommend playing it in 1 session, because then you'll remember all of the different scenarios and story beats, and you can see all the alternative timelines. So this was a game I had no idea what it was when I went into it. All I saw was that it was like a compilation of Flash games, which that was like, oh my god, this is going to be an old game. The Flash games were a big thing back in the early, the 2010 era, maybe before. I just remember when I was in university, this was the golden age of Flash games. When you had some time to kill and you didn't want to buy a new game, you'd head over to newgrounds.com, you navigate the site, get rid of all the weird, there were some really weird games in there. There was also a lot of, but you had to navigate all that to find the good games, and they were oftentimes related to stick figure games, animations, and it was a lot of point and click. So that is very much the gameplay of Henry Stickmin, where you follow the story of Henry Stickmin, who's a thief, and you pick what options you want him to do to progress the story. So in the first chapter, he is interested in robbing a bank. And your first option is okay, well, to get into this bank, you can dig underneath, you can walk up the wall, you can use a laser, you can use a teleporter. What will you do? And most of those options will result in Henry Stickmin dying or failing and not succeeding. And then one of those will progress the story. As you continue playing the game, things get a little bit more complex, where some choices can lead to other branching paths, and then it just kind of spirals off into there, where you get all these sorts of different endings and kind of funny different reactions from the game and the characters. And there was always a little note from the game developers commenting on your choice of why did you choose that? What were you thinking would happen? So it's really fun and quick to kind of just play through the story and see what happens. And there are 3 collectibles. If you like collecting things, this is actually quite good. And it helps encourage the player to see all the content the game has to offer. So even if you make it through, let's say, a playthrough or a chapter or the whole playthrough, whatever, picking the right options, you'll actually be encouraged and want to go back to different spots and say, what would have happened if I picked this instead? And the game has a menu system that lets you do that, so you're not wasting your time reviewing content that you haven't already seen. It's actually quite easy to see all the endings. Now, the other 2 collectibles are a little trickier. One is NPC clicking. So at any point when you see NPCs, if you right click on them, you can unlock their profile. And in the first chapter, that's quite easy because you have a dozen. By chapter 8, you have over 100 to collect. And while they're all stick figures, it can be a little tricky to say did I collect him? So you oftentimes have to just click them all just to hope, in the hopes that you're getting them all. But sometimes these characters only show up on screen for a moment in the background, and you have to be very quick to click them. So it can be quite a challenge. The third thing is achievements. And achievements usually requires you to click on things that aren't necessarily inherently obvious that you can click on. So for example, sometimes it could I'm making this up, but it could be good job, thumbs up, and then you click the thumb up, and then it will give you a Facebook reference or something, and it's oh, achievement unlocked. There's one actually you have to use at one point. You try to use I think you try to use a key on a door that doesn't have a keyhole, if I remember, and the game's you can't do that. And if you click it again, the dialogue is slightly different, where it's we just said you can't do that, and then you click again, it's really, we told you can't do that. And then you do it again, and then something else happens, and then you get your achievement unlocked. So you have to be if you don't use a guide, you have to be very observant as to what the game is allowing you to do and what's not allowing you to do. So yeah, collecting stuff, very fun. Story, it's just a fun time, lots of comedy, nothing too inappropriate. And I think this game is best experienced as a group. While it can be funny alone, there's a lot of gaming references and even some film references in the game that would be very hard for someone to know all of it. There's just so much. So when you're playing with a group, you can oftentimes almost kind of compete with each other, like, oh, I get this reference. Oh, that's a Mario Kart reference. That's a Metal Gear Solid reference. And while I was playing with viewers, you know, I was recognizing a lot of my own stuff that I'm familiar with, but there was a lot of other stuff. It flew over my head. People were like, oh, that's a reference to this. And the whole chat was kind of going off, and it almost kind of became a little mini game of who can point out all the references in the scene and the story, because there's just so much in there, and it gets even more heavy the further along you go into the story. That served as almost like a side little game on its own, which was quite fun. The other surprise I had was that I think it's the same team that worked on Among Us, or there's some correlation between this game and Among Us, because the ship that they announced as DLC in Among Us is the ship from Henry Stickmin. So when you get into like chapter 3, you encounter, I think it's chapter 3 or 4, you encounter this Top Hat clan, and they fly in this big red ship. And the first time I saw the ship, I was like, Amogus. And one of the things I love about this 12 Days of Hey Jay, unrelated note, is I'm learning so much about a medium that I thought I knew a lot about. Like, if you would ask me, what is your video game knowledge at? I'd be like, oh, it's like an 8 or 9 out of 10. And I've played my whole life. I've been tuned in and working in the video game industry for the last 5-6 years. And I thought I was quite familiar with video games in general, but what I'm learning through this past year and this all the content I've been making is just how little I know. And it's so cool to just keep uncovering new things. And while I'm kind of like, you know, dabbling in everything, it's worth noting that everything I dabble in, everything goes deeper. You know, there's a whole like Among Us community with all sorts of like deeper stuff. There's probably a Henry Stickmin community with a whole lot more stuff. Dark Souls I've gone through, but I know that the lore goes so much deeper, even though I do watch some of the lore videos. There's just so much more there to uncover. So this has just been a great adventure with like so many of new like little tidbits of trivia and just pieces of history that are all coming together. But enough about that. When it comes to Henry Stickmin, you know, it's a game I did complete. I'm not sure if I'm going to go back to 100%ing it, because it is a bit tedious to just go back and click on NPCs and try to figure out the achievements. And I don't know if the payoff would be worthwhile for me. So I don't know if I'm going to 100% it just to get my full achievement list. Maybe if I'm bored someday, which, yeah, that doesn't happen too often. Otherwise, I recommend playing it. Grab a friend, play with each other to see if you can get all of the references in the game. And otherwise, I will see you on the next video, the next review, the next whatever I do. And until next time, keep it classy. Subscribe.